My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Go Cloud team.
Welcome, everyone. I am Michael Gibbs, the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I am joined by our Chief Marketing Officer and Cloud Architect, Alonzo Coleman, and we're here today to help you build your cloud computing career. Maybe your goal is to become a cloud architect or a solutions architect or an enterprise architect or a generative AI architect, a network architect, or any other career. We're here to help you. I've personally spent more than 25 years in the technology industry, and I've been an IT architect now for over 25 years. I've also spent more than 2 decades helping people just like you build your technology career. And you can find my graduates working at Apple, at Amazon, at Cisco, and IBM, and Google, and Microsoft, Zscaler, Palo Alto Systems, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, Barclays Bank, British Broadcasting Company, and every other prestigious organization you can think of. And I come here once or twice a week with my team to answer your technology career questions for free. And there's a reason I do it. I hate to see people spend years trying to become something and not get to their goals because they learned the wrong skills. I can't tell you how many people we've worked with and had to retrain of people that took cloud architect boot camps, and they learned everything other than architecture. They learned Terraform, they learned Linux, they learned to code, which is not anything we do as architects. And that's why we're here, to guide you in building your career so that you can have a career that you love. So please ask us your questions, and that's why we come here. So I just want to know that you don't have a career that looks like this. You know, all these people, they go to LinkedIn and they say, here's what we think a career is, but here's what it really is, up and then crash down and up and then crash down and up and then crash down. Doesn't need to be that way. My career was pretty much straight up, but why was it straight up? I knew that when I was younger, 25 years ago, I didn't know about a tech career. So I went to the VP of architecture and said, what do you want, the best architect you could possibly hire or imagine? And the VP told me. 2 years later, I was a principal architect, and then my career just grew. I had jumped 15 years of experience required for a role like that because of the guidance that I got from someone else. And that's why we do this, and we're here for free. So if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, ask your questions so we can help you. I love watching people get hired. We get someone hired almost every day, and it's one of the most fun things that I can absolutely talk about. So, you know, Alonzo, want to say hello? Want to say a few words while we wait for questions to pile in?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's always good just hanging out with Mike, learning. We're always growing together, and also being able to expound and share our knowledge as we move forward in cloud architecture, enterprise architecture, and now AI as well. So we are always excited to do these things, share these things with you. So please ask away. We are here during this time. Normally, we're always innovating, working together to put together really great stuff, really great content with great people such as David Linthicum. And we do it all for you so that you can have a direct entryway into being a cloud architect, enterprise architect, cloud network architect, cloud security architect, AI architect, and so forth. So lay out your questions. We're looking forward to helping you.
Absolutely. So Tyrone, bring in the first question from Doug, and then hopefully other people will ask questions.
From Doug Bones, does the Cloud Architect program apply to helping students finding cloud engineering jobs only?
Doug Bones, absolutely not. The Cloud Architect program is dedicated to helping people become cloud architects and get cloud architect jobs, not cloud engineering jobs. But you brought up an interesting question. So let's talk about this. If you train to be a cloud architect, you'll never get an engineering job because you won't be able to. And if you train to be a cloud engineer, you won't be able to get a cloud architect job because they're very different skills. So Doug, let's talk about what we do as cloud architects versus cloud engineers. And then you'll understand why cloud architect training will get you a cloud architect job. And cloud engineering training will get you a cloud engineering job. So here's what we actually do as architects, Doug. And you can hear David Linthicum speak about it. You can hear me speak about it. You can look in CIO magazine and see what we do. Here's what I do as an architect. I go to the client and I speak to their leadership. Ideally, the CEO, this chief operating officer, or one of the leadership. And I ask them, what are the goals for your business? Where do you want your business to be now? 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, and 20 years from now? Because I don't know the business goals, Doug. I don't have any idea what kind of systems and people and processes that are going to be needed to help that organization achieve their goals. Then I actually have to analyze and understand how that business operates, which means I need to map out the organization's business processes. How is the product created, for example? How is customer service delivered? How is the product or service sold? You know, there's processes that organizations have for this, and you need to understand their current business processes. And then working with those executives at that organization, if the business goals are to do X, Y, and Z, we need to create new business processes or re-architect the business processes to get that organization to X, Y, and Z. Now, Doug, after we understand the business processes and we map them out, and in order to do that, we need to know a lot about business, and we've got to have a lot of executive communication skills. Then we can start looking at the organization's technology. What does their data technology look like? What does their hardware technology look like? What does their software technology look like? What is the structure of it? How is it put together? And then after that, we need to think, and we go back into the drawing board and we say, hey, wait, these goals, this future state of the business and these future business processes, what do we need to do to adopt the technology in order to get the technology to support the new business goals? So from there, we can design our technology solution by understanding the future goals of the business. Then we've got to go build an architecture team, because architecture is a team sport. It's not done by one person. And for a normal architecture, let's say I'm a cloud architect or a lead enterprise architect, and I'm dealing with a global enterprise like a bank, which is where I've worked most of my career, Now I've got, or a healthcare organization or an internet service provider. Now I've got to go work across that organization. And I'm going to have to manage all the department heads, see what that organization needs to do. I'm going to assess the organization's readiness for change. And now I'm going to build a team of the architects to go assist with this. And when I build an architecture team, I'm probably going to use a network architect, a security architect, an identity and access management architect. I might bring in some engineers, some DevOps engineers, because they do something different than we do. I might bring in some cloud engineers because of, kind of think of all the technology things that we've done. So got to keep all of that in the back of our mind. So I got to go build a team for the actual design. And then after that, after we build the team for the design, we're going to design the thing. The architect leads the system. Then the architect's got to document it along with the team. The architect has to go back to the organization, present this architecture, sell the solution to the organization. And after we sell the solution to the organization, then we've got to go help negotiate a business deal. We've got to help design a governance strategy. And then when it's time to be built, in most cases, we're often a new organization and a team of cloud engineers builds it. So the cloud architect skills, Doug Bones, which we teach, are everything you need to know. They are those network, data center, cloud, AI skills to design the solution. They are those business skills to understand the business. They are those business process re-engineering skills to help the organization with their business processes. They are the negotiation skills, the leadership skills, the sales skills, the executive presence, presentation skills, and everything we need to be an architect. That's what we teach in an architect program. And that's why we've got people with no background or experience working everywhere. And people like Yvonne Tamba, hired by AWS, who was a college student. People like Al Legister, who was a sales rep, who became a senior solutions architect at Deloitte at his first tech job. Balwinder, who was a stay-at-home mom, hired as a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. Jennifer Ema, who was a mental health tech, hired by JP Morgan Chase. Wallace Agana, a sales rep, hired as an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase. People like Jermaine, who was selling landscaping gear, who's now an enterprise architect, because we teach architecture skills in there. Now, Doug, what does a cloud engineer do? They take the blueprints that we give them as architects and they go build this. So the cloud engineer is not going to be working with stakeholders and selling. They're going to be building the system. So that means implementing things with the management console, the CLI, and infrastructure as code, mostly infrastructure as code. And that means that cloud engineer is going to need to be an expert builder, not a designer, but a builder. They're going to have to be able to understand how to administer the systems, which means good, strong knowledge of Windows and Linux. It means that they're going to have to understand scripting, whether that be Python scripting, Bash shell scripting, Windows PowerShell scripting, infrastructure as code, say in the form of Terraform. And now you can see, architect trains you to be an architect, that's the system designer. Engineering skills train you to be an engineer. Now, Doug Bones, I don't train engineers anymore. And the reason I don't train engineers is what we do as architects is very special. Lots of communications, lots of presentations, lots of relationships. And that all is human dominated. Why do I love human dominated things? Because we can't be replaced by AI. But what does that engineer do? They code, they write a Terraform script, they write a Python script, a Bash shell script, and that can be automated. And that's why, Doug Bones, we stopped selling cloud engineering programs about 1.5 years ago. And we only focus on architecture careers because architecture is the career of the future. Hope I answered your question. Love to work with you. Love to help you become an architect, but we don't train engineers. We only train architects. Now you know why.
Great response, Mike. Okay, the next question is going to be from Tobias. Hi, Michael. Is your cloud architect program also suitable for boosting the career of a solutions architect?
Absolutely, Tobias. So here's the thing. Generally speaking, a cloud architect designs a multi-cloud solution, and a solutions architect designs whatever it is for a single vendor. So if you work at AWS, you design, present, and sell AWS solutions. If you work at Azure as a solutions architect, you design, present, and sell Azure solutions. If you work at NVIDIA, you design, present, and sell NVIDIA solutions. So that's the real difference. Cloud is going to be broader, and solutions architect is going to be there. But I've got a stack of people hired as solutions architects. And I can think of a solution architect. His name begins with an O. I won't say the rest of it. He came to me. He'd been a solutions architect for 20 years. We got him a job at Google for $409,000, which is about a $250,000 raise over his previous solutions architect job. I've got a lot of solutions architects that we take and we bring them in, and then we really boost their executive skills, because a lot of people accidentally became architects and they didn't really have the business acumen, the leadership skills, the executive presence, those presentation skills. And when you take those people who are really strong on the tech, and then you give them these elite business skills, and you improve their system design skills, and you boost their fundamentals, specifically in networking, security, and AI, their careers rise like you can't even imagine. So yes, we work with lots of solutions architects. And I like to tell people, Tobias, any cloud architect can work as a solutions architect, but a solutions architect often has trouble working as a cloud architect. Because here's the thing. If you understand the network, the data center, and a cloud, for real, and you truly understand it, it doesn't matter if you're using an Nutanix cloud, an OpenStack cloud, the AWS cloud, the Azure cloud, the Google cloud, the HP cloud, the Oracle cloud. It doesn't matter, because a virtual machine is the same virtual machine in all clouds. I mean, sure, AWS made up a marketing term called elastic compute. I have no idea why they did it. Google made up a marketing term called compute engine instance. At least Microsoft calls it an Azure virtual machine. Oracle calls it a virtual machine, but it's the same technology we've had since 1999 that VMware gave us. Same thing. Same thing with our storage area networks. Does it matter whether we call it an Azure managed disk or elastic block storage? Same thing. Same block storage we've used for the last 2 decades, 3 decades. Does it matter if I talk about object storage in my data center, or AWS calls it S3, or Microsoft calls it blob, or Google calls it cloud storage? It's the same thing. So cloud architect is more generic. But yeah, we work with a tremendous number of solutions architects. We got lots of solutions architects hired. We get lots of solutions architects promoted. You know, and it looks at me, and I'm just thinking about Jordan Kittico. Yeah. Because, you know, we worked with him when he was in college. College student, got hired as a solutions architect at AWS. I'm pretty sure that I just saw he got promoted as a senior solutions architect a year later. So there you go. You know, kid, fresh out of school. And when I saw him present at our conference, he was a rock star. He's absolutely incredible. So the key is, yes, we work with cloud architects, solutions architects, and architects in general. We add that extra business expertise and that extra sales expertise and that presentation expertise, which honestly can add $50,000 to $100,000 to an architect's salary like nothing. So hope that makes sense to you. Please ask your questions. Don't be shy.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of knowledge Mike has. From Alan, it's good to see you, buddy. Could you talk about learning AI as an architect? Most of the information or classes are related to the coding.
So, Alan, if you want to be an architect, it's not about coding, it's about designing the systems. So let's say you're going to design an AI system. We have to think about the data, right? The data drives the AI architecture. So what do we need to deal with and think about from a data hygiene perspective? What about a data normalization perspective when we leave multiple databases to create our data? So we have to think about that, not coding, and I'll tell you what's going on and why that's out there. We have to think about the compute. Where's it going to run? Is it going to run on a CPU, a GPU, a TPU, an FPGA, or an ASIC? We have to think about that. We have to think about its performance, Alan. You know, if we run it in the private cloud or the data center, we've got nothing in the way of latency. If we run it in the public cloud, we've got latency. Can we deal with that latency? The compute is going to and storage is typically going to be much cheaper in our data center. But do we need it to run 24 hours a day? Should we leverage the public cloud and use pre-made systems in the public cloud that may make it easier? We then have to think about the application of it. We have to think about how the organization will use it, which business processes will be changed. So, Alan, that's why we teach architecture. And quite frankly, I think we're the only architecture academy out there. Now, what's really going out there with this AI training? It's training provided by the vendors to lower your salary. And what do I mean by this? You know, when you have a rare skill. So when I became a Cisco certified internet expert back in 2000, you know, the CCIs were getting about $100 to $120 an hour. And they were all working about 60 hours a week. So with 60 hours a week at $100 an hour, that was $300,000. Some people that I knew were earning about $400,000 as a CCI in 2000. Now, if you adjust that for inflation, you're dealing with about $1.2 million. Why is that? Because you're on a supply and demand curve with a huge demand to build up the internet and those networks and lack of supply. Now, that's what we're dealing right now. There is almost nobody that teaches architecture, and that's why those architects are paid so well. Now, when it came to the engineering, the vendor said, we can't make people buy our AI stuff if nobody knows how to build it. So the vendors offer these cheap training things, which was designed to increase the supply of the architecture engineers to lower the engineering salaries. We don't focus on engineering, we focus on architecture. And that's why you're going to see so many of these ridiculous free AI training things that are going to be taught from an engineering perspective, and they're given away for free because they want a lot of people. to lower your salary. And when we look at this, it's the same thing. You can look at certifications. There are some certifications that increase your salary. The CCIE, a CISSP, a CISM, and they're created to build your career and give you a level of knowledge like nothing else in the world. And there's other certifications like a cloud practitioner or the equivalent on other ones, which are designed to create a surplus of people. So when a cloud computing company says, look, I got 18 million people out there that are certified, employers go, it's going to be real easy for me to hire someone and it's not going to be costly. So yes, we are the only people teaching architecture. And quite frankly, Alan, that's why I asked David Lithicum to do it with me. Look, I've been involved in AI system design since 2000. I have. But David Lithicum's been designing AI systems since the 1980s. In fact, the systems he designed in the 80s landed him a job at NASA in the 1990s. And he's been designing AI systems for pretty much every global enterprise you can think of when he was Deloitte's head of cloud strategy. And that's why he and I collaborated. You know, whether it's me or David as architects, here's what we kind of do. We note that everybody else that's out there is teaching engineering. And then what happens? The people develop engineering skills, which is good if you want to be an engineer. Now they want to be an architect and someone asks them about responding to an RFI, RFP, RFQ, and they don't know where to begin. They ask them about how to design a business case and they don't understand. They ask them about, determining the financial metrics. So do we do it in-house versus like the data center versus the cloud, and they don't understand financial structures. An organization talks about their financial problems, and unless the architect understands how to read a balance sheet, reads how to about a financial statement, they can't do it. So, Alan, that's why 100% of our architecture is there. I came out of retirement doing just private coaching. Oh, that's my silly AI in the background that I can't shut off with Apple. I can shut it off for other applications, but not the StreamYard application we're using for whatever reason. But, that's the key. David joined us to really do AI right. And I came out of retirement because I had designed many of these clouds that are out there now, and people didn't understand. They were taking certification courses. They knew the name of a service and how to configure it, and they wanted to work as architects. But architects don't talk about the name of services. They use generic terms. They speak in business terms, and we don't configure anything. So I hope I answered your question out there, Alan.
Lots of information now that we can definitely help you with. Also from Alan, do you have any additional resources that you trust from learning or being familiar with AI? It feels like everything Google Cloud Platform and AWS is publishing feels like what they did with the AWS professional certification.
So Alan, there's very minimal out there on AI architecture, and that's why I created the program with David, where he does his AI and we do our special business acumen, leadership, sales, executive presence. But where can you learn about AI? If you're not going to go to us, you can learn quite a lot about it from NVIDIA. Their systems are going to power everything. You can learn about PyTorch, TensorFlow, and other machine learning libraries because it's going to be there. You can learn about data hygiene and data management and big data frameworks because you're going to be there. You can learn about data science and all those things because they're going to be there. And all that stuff kind of goes into AI architecture. But, at least that way, you're learning the tech and how to use the tech. If you go to AWS, they're not even going to tell you how the tech works. It's going to be, here's my Bedrock solution. Use it, use it, use it. It's great. I promise you, it's great. And in some ways, it is great. In other ways, it may not be the best solution. Same thing with Microsoft, same thing for Google. Is it better for you to develop your own? Is it better there? But no, you can learn about AI models and learn about data structures and learn about databases. And I mean all the databases, learn about mapping and reduction functions. Things like PySpark and big data frameworks like Hadoop. Learn about every kind of database you can think of, data warehouses, NoSQL databases, relational databases, graph databases, you name it. It's going to be there. You're going to be dealing with databases. And of course, Alan, you've got all this AI, which needs compute. And that could be best on the CPU. It could be best on the GPU. It could be best on an ASIC. It could be good on an FPGA. Who knows? It could run on an ARM processor because all this stuff is out there. So we have to understand the data, the way we're mining the data, what we're doing with the data, and how we're going to design these algorithms, and how we're going to use it to benefit the business. And that's the thing. These certifications don't talk about anything related to business because they're designed to create commodity, inexpensive, cheap techs, where what we're teaching is designed to teach executive architects that really go out there and do a lot.
From Cloud Station, I had a discussion with someone who has a cybersecurity background, Mike, and wants to learn cloud security. Please, what are the transferable skills for any for cloud careers, if any?
Well, It depends on the career. So, and if he's got a cybersecurity background and he wants to learn cloud security, it's the same. I mean, it really is. So if you're dealing with true security, you're dealing with how do I protect an organization? And what does that mean? I mean, first, it means, protecting the organization from the outside, whether that be the demilitarized zones for various things that need to be resourced. It deals, so there's that. And whether that means, next generation firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, how many layers of firewalls, what do we put public, what do we not put public? They wouldn't know that. And honestly, it's the same situation, cloud or non-cloud. Now, what else goes into it? Designing a security policy, at least from an architect perspective. And I don't know, CloudStation, if this is an engineer or an architect. So could you provide me some more information? Because what an architect needs to know for cybersecurity versus what an engineer needs to know for cybersecurity, kind of like a cat and a dog. They both have 4 feet. They both have good hearing. They both have a good sense of smell and a tail. But I promise you, a cat and a dog are very different animals. And an architect and an engineer are equally different animals. I love them all. Cats, dogs, engineers, architects, I like anything. But, that's neither here nor there. So let's think about this. So, if they're working in some capacity in cybersecurity, they're typically used for system hardening. Whether that be, taking a system and disabling unnecessary packages, closing on ports, and putting malware protection or something like that. The same encryption strategies that you would use in any kind of cybersecurity, you would use in the cloud. And whether that's encrypting your data in flight, whether it's encrypting your wide area network, whether it's encrypting your physical links, whether it be frame relay, ATM, Ethernet, etc., things like IPsec, it's the same kind of TLS that you would use between a browser and there. So it's really the same thing. What else would be the same? Identity and access management, right? We're going to have Microsoft Active Directory in the data center. We're going to have Microsoft Active Directory in a federated environment in the cloud. How about an organization's, storage strategy? How about, maintaining and protecting the assets, asset tracking? In cybersecurity, we're thinking about disaster recovery planning and business continuity planning. In cybersecurity, we're talking about quantifying the security risk. It's the same kind of thing that we're going to be doing over here. So honestly, nothing really changes. CloudStation, I can think of a student of mine who very recently we trained them. He went to become a cloud analyst. And then when he actually interviewed to be for that, they said, you should be a cloud security architect. He interviewed for that. And they're like, I think you'd be better off in a bigger role as a security architect. So someone that's got a good cybersecurity background can easily do cloud security. They're going to know more. And the cloud is just another network and a data center. And the reality is the cloud's going to have their proprietary security stuff. But when it comes to an enterprise level, we're not going to use most of it. We're going to go to the same enterprise tools that we're going to get from a Cisco or a Fortinet or a Checkpoint or a Palo Alto. We're going to be using those same SIEM systems. We're going to use the same kind of data loss prevention strategies. So we'll tune it a little bit. It's the same job. Cybersecurity means securing the organization. Cloud security is securing the stuff in the organization's cloud. So they'll have a very good strong. Now, here's the question, CloudStation. If they were a cybersecurity engineer, meaning they're working on the firewalls, for example, and they're setting up an IDS IPS system and they're managing a SIEM system, and now they want to be an architect, they're going to need a new set of training because they know how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? But not how to design, not how to understand the business problems, probably not how to design a security policy, probably not how to understand how to work with the CXO leaders. So if they want to go from an engineer to an architect, they're going to need training because it's kind of like going from a nurse to a doctor. Even if you're both in healthcare, you still need training when you go from one to the other because it's a different job. Hope I answered your question there, CloudStation. Please feel free to ask more. I love when you ask questions. Usually have a lot of good ones.
From Simon, when a cloud architect communicates with different department heads or frontline staff through coffee or dinner meetings, is it common to bring other business professionals along?
Absolutely. So, I visit a client site. One day I may take them to lunch. One day I may take them to drinks. One day I take them to drinks and dinner all the time. Now, here's the thing. If I'm going to be taking out a group of techies, I'm going to bring some engineers with me. And those engineers can have those engineers conversations. Now I'm meeting with the CEO. And if it's $1 billion opportunity, I may bring the VP of sales with me, as well as the sales executive. And that's showing them some love. Like, we care about you. Our executives are involved and they know and care, so they're there, which means I need to be an expert at understanding how to communicate to their executives and selling our executives on the need to go to this meeting, meaning showing them the opportunity. Because if that executive has two places they can spend their time, opportunity A versus opportunity B, there's an opportunity cost to a meeting. So I have to convince them that my meeting is more important than the other architect that also wants to bring them to a meeting. So that's good about your sales skills and your business acumen. But yeah, we're constantly bringing other people. This is a team sport. You know, there's my favorite quote out of Africa that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And think about it. Let's pretend Alonzo is my chief executive officer of a client. Now, I go to Alonzo, just me. And, you know, that might be fine. Now I go just me. I bring the account executive. I bring the VP of sales. And we're also, he's really concerned about AI. Now I bring a David Lithicum with me at the same time. Now that CEO is pretty happy. Okay, I've got 100 plus years experience in this room. This company really cares about me. And then Alonzo, the CEO, is going to be willing to talk to me. By comparison, if I showed up as just me, he'd probably still be happy to talk to me, but he's not going to feel the love. And what do I mean by that? Now it's $1 billion opportunity and he sees me. Great. But if he sees that VP of sales, which I brought with me, and he sees an AI architect like David with, 30 years experience in addition to me and my 25 years experience, and he sees that account manager, he knows that the company that I work for truly cares about his business, that I went above and beyond to bring in a team. And he now knows those people. He knows that VP of sales. And even though sales has nothing to do with customer service, Alonzo, who's the CEO, now knows, wait, I got a problem. I'm calling Mike. I'm calling the VP of sales. I got a single throat to choke, as they like to call it. And if I call that VP of sales, that VP of sales will bring in Mike. He'll come down himself. He'll bring in other people because they care about my business. So yes, always, 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 I'm going to try to bring the right resource to the meeting, which is another reason you have to have good business acumen and good sales skills. Because not only do you need to sell your client, but you got to sell the people in your internal organizations to want to work with you. Really great question, Simon, and I kind of hope I answered your question there. And clearly, I should not spill water on me.
It's all right, Mike. Simon, again, if a company has only one cloud architect, how can it gain business analysis support?
Simon, if a company has only one cloud architect, they don't really care about technology at all. And technology is not going to be a major part of their business. If it's a real organization, they're going to have multiple architects. They're going to have network architects. They're going to have IM architects. They're going to have security architects. They're going to have a cloud architect. They probably have an enterprise architect as well. But if you're the only architect, how do you gain business analysis support? You become the business executive. You got to go figure it out. You got to write the business case, which you're going to have to do anyway. Which means you're going to have to quantify the organization's challenge. You're going to have to understand that organization's business processes. You're going to have to identify gaps and weaknesses in that business processes. You're going to have to identify the opportunity cost of money spent in point A to point B. You're going to have to evaluate the technology and a projected expected value of a return on investment capital. It's up to you, Simon. It's up to you. That's why we train so many business skills. Because as the architect, if you're the lead architect, that's going to be your job. You're bringing in these other people for technical expertise. And Simon, that's where people go wrong. They think we architects are super techies. If you think too much about the tech as an architect, your job's over. You're fired. Because you're focusing on the tech like an engineer and not focusing on the organization's strategy like an architect. So that's up to you. You're the one that's going to get the business analysis. You have to do the analysis. You can't rely on anybody else. The same way when a doctor walks in and sees a patient, even if a previous doctor wrote him a note about the patient, that doctor is going to do their own exam. Because we can't trust that a business analyst has anywhere near the level of business acumen that an architect does, because they don't. They don't. It's kind of like saying the person that brought you into the doctor's office, the assistant, the medical assistant, that asks you questions and takes your blood pressure and puts you on the table, knows what the doctor knows. And when the doctor asks the question of question A, they get a different understanding than the person that has less of a background. So that's up to you. So that's why you got to develop your business acumen. And that's why people go wrong. They learn code, they learn DevOps, they learn SysOps, and they don't learn architecture. And without knowledge of architecture, they can't do it. And being able to understand the business and analyze that business is one of the key goals of the architect. So that's on you. You're going to have to be able to do it. And honestly, small company, big company, you're going to have to be able to do that on every architecture. If not, you're an engineer, not an architect. And that's why engineers need so much training. That's why when I've got cloud engineers with 10 years experience, it takes me the same amount of training to become a cloud architect as someone that used to be a housewife or a mother or a nurse or a mental health tech or someone selling landscaping gear or a TV personality who just popped in, oh, we trained who's now working as a good architect. It's up to you. That's your job. So make sure you learn those business skills.
And one of the great things about that, Simon, is that as a cloud architect, as you build that relationship with your prospective clients, the closer you get to them, the more they're going to share the details of the business with you so that you are able to formulate a strong position on how to add value. So it's not always going to be the business analyst, as Mike said, to give you all that detailed information. It's going to be up to you, along with your EA, along with your business acumen, sales skills, and so forth, to kind of gently pull it out of them so that they grow to trust you. The more they trust you, the more that they'll share so that you can reciprocate with great solutions. Sumit, based on the amount of information you shared here for free, I might add, with unconditional love is tremendous. Where can I find your closest competitors if they even exist?
Sumit, and I mean this in the most respectful way, and thank you for your comments. We don't have any competitors that teach what we do. We have competitors that teach systems administration and call it architecture. And here's what happens. The people finish their programs and then they can't get hired and then they come to us. Now, where are our true competitors? I'll tell you. Business schools, specifically MBAs, are competition to us. And I'm happy to have that competition. I'm happy for any of my students to go get an MBA. I really am. Because what are we as architects? We're 50 to 80% executive and 20 to 50% technology professional. That's why our competition isn't competition, because they're teaching engineering. And then someone goes on an interview, and yep, they know how to write a Python script. They know DevOps, which is not our job. And someone says, you know, our weighted average cost of capital is 7.25%. How would you consider that when determining whether to build a private cloud or a public cloud? And the people go, huh? And they say, and they go on an interview, and they're being told, how would you respond to this RFP? How do you respond to an RFP? What's your RFP process? And the person says, RFP, what the heck is that? Or they give the person the opportunity to present a business case along with an architecture, and the person talks about the tech without the business benefits. Or when someone says, look, how would you design your secure demilitarized zone for XYZ application? And the person doesn't know what a demilitarized zone is because they're teaching them how to. And we're teaching them architecture, which is the system design and how to optimize business. So honestly, we've got nothing. The only competition exists are the MBA programs out there because they teach a lot of what we teach. But the MBA programs are actually lacking the, they're lacking the system design and the technology and the network and the data center. So we do this. And I'll tell you what the kind of staff we have. We have 2 PhD business school professors that teach in an MBA program. I've been an architect now for 25 years and hold an MBA. I actually used to practice internal medicine, but that's another skill. We've got Alonzo, for example, who teaches marketing. He was a marketing executive for 30 years with an MBA. We've got our Chief Operating Officer, Christopher Johnson. Again, he's got an MBA. We've got Eddie, who's got a law degree, who's over there in Cameroon, who also is an architect. We've got Tyrone right now, who's in South Africa. I've got Mark Milovanovic, who is a network architect and a CCIE teaching in this program. I have Angelo, who helps teach, and Angelo is a chief technology officer and is an enterprise architect, which we trained down an application architect. Lohit comes in periodically, and he teaches our application architecture because that's his career. And I've got Praveen, who's been a big data architect for 20 years. So no one does what we do. And I'm not here to malign anybody else. They do a fine job teaching systems administration and engineering, but we're the only people that are architects. And why is that? The reality is I retired when I was 34. So I had a really great architecture career and could afford to. But I just love getting people hired. So in my retirement, all I was doing was coaching this person, coaching this person, coaching this person. And I had great jobs. And I found the best feeling in the world was working with someone, changing their life, changing their salary, and putting them in an environment where they can have generational wealth. And especially a lot of the people who work with grew up like me, where we had nothing, and we worked 4 jobs to try and go through school. And when you see someone get that and get a big, $150,000, $250,000, $300,000 job, and then poof, the person's life has changed, that kind of makes me happy. So I do what I do because I love it, but we don't really have any competition. There's people that try to talk architecture, but they're teaching engineering. And it's kind of like a cat versus a dog. Great furry animals. We need both. We really do. We need engineers to build the stuff that the architects design. Otherwise, all I do is write fancy documents, do negotiations, build teams, re-architect business processes, and write beautiful PowerPoints and documents, and sell it. But if the engineers aren't there to build it, we've got nothing. So we need both. It's just that my expertise and love is architecture. It really is. It's what I love to do. It's what I've done ever since I left medicine. And honestly, Sumit, what did you do in medicine? You meet with a patient, you ask about their health goals, you ask about their wellness goals, you examine them, and then you build a plan. What I do as an architect, I meet with the business, I ask them about their business goals, their pain points, I evaluate them, and build them a plan. So what I learned in internal medicine is the exact job we do as architects. I just happen to get lucky. Going to school to be a nurse practitioner, a physician assistant, or a doctor is exactly the same training as you would need to be an architect. Other than there, I learned healthcare stuff, and here we're dealing with business stuff and tech stuff. Same thing, though. Same job.
Back to Sumit. When you have only 15 minutes interview, would it be better to provide concise explanations to keep them brief, allowing the interview more opportunities to ask additional questions?
So that's a great question, Sumit Raj. So here's the key. We have to read the situation under all occasions. And we've got to read the interviewer's body language when we're speaking. But as a rule, I'll give you some tips. An executive has a 1/10 of 1 second attention span. A hiring manager has about a 5 to 10 second attention span. If you're asked a question and you go over 30 seconds, chances are the hiring manager is thinking about taking their wife or husband to dinner. They're thinking about their workout they're going to do that night. They're thinking about how can they get out of this meeting because the person's babbling and all they hear is blah, 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 and they can't wait to get the heck out of there. They're thinking about their lunch. They're thinking this person gave me a headache and I need a drink. They're thinking something like that. So, and I've interviewed thousands of people. So the key is first you've got to read the situation. But, and here's the big but, you definitely have to be concise in your answers. Even if you ask me to tell you about myself, and I've been around for 25 years, I can do it in 30 seconds or less. Let's try it. I am a cloud architect with over 25 years experience. I have experience designing billion-dollar solutions for the world's largest organizations. I have experience with business optimization and digital transformation. I've trained architects that work at all the world's greatest organizations. Less than 25 seconds.
Yep.
And that's the key. It's got to come out crisp and concise because people's attention spans, they were always bad. But now with all this Facebook messaging and Instagram messaging and LinkedIn messaging, WhatsApp messaging, iMessage messaging, text message messaging coming in, and emails, when you're dealing with someone that's in the position to hire a $200,000 employee, they're being bombarded and they're executives at that point and they've got nothing. They're so busy. So you got to keep it concise. Now, if you happen to get lucky and it happens to be one thing that you know so well, and they ask you a very open-ended question and you can succinctly explain and answer to them in a minute or less, that shows them you're so good, you can stop the interview. I call it the shut down the interview technique. So, Sumit, in the description of this video and many of the videos on our YouTube channel, you should find out the winning the interview guide. And I recommend you get that winning the interview guide. It will go out there. It will help you win the interview, and it's completely free. So go get it. Before we get to the next question, I probably should tell everybody that we have a new generative AI program available that's on sale for 50% off until the last day of April. It's taught by David Lithicum and me combined. David Lithicum's teaching the AI, and me and my team will be teaching all those business acumen, leadership skills, sales skills, executive skills, etc. We also have a How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar on Thursday. So please join us completely on the completely free webinar. And while you're at it, if you want to be a cloud architect or an AI architect, in the description of this video, there are free guides that we wrote, free ebooks to help you get your first architect job, whether it's an AI architect or cloud architect. Obviously, it's a different document. They're different careers.
Back to Alan. I've signed up for summer writing courses at a local community college to improve my writing. Could you and Alonzo share ways you've improved?
Alan, absolutely. So yes, I have spent too many years in school. I did a master's degree in healthcare and a master and an MBA. Actually, 2 MBAs, but I only finished one. The other one, I got 1 3/4 the way through and got a job that was so good It was an opportunity I couldn't refuse and had to take it. And didn't love the university, so I did the MBA at another university. Now, I'll tell you what, in school, here's what I learned. How not to write.
That's the irony, right?
In an MBA program, I would like you to write a 40-page document, double-spaced, in American Psychiatric Association format. Okay. And I wrote all this garbage, all this fluff that was big and wordy with fancy words that everybody was all, hey, Mike, great job. And then I actually worked in the business world as an executive. And executives prefer to read it at 6th grade level or less. They prefer to read it in 1 to 2 pages whenever possible. So what I learned is exactly how to do executive writing. Now, I got to tell you, I did not learn it in school. Now, Alan, I know your background. It's not super heavy in education, but you're super, super smart. So sure, go add some education. I think it's a good thing. But the way they're going to teach you to write, sure, learn the commas, learn the semicolons, learn all that stuff. That is great. But don't learn to write the way they're going to teach you in the community college. I went to learn to write the exact opposite way. Learn how to write for the reader. Learn how to write to make it simple. Learn how to write with lots of space between your lines. They used to call it white space because you had a white piece of paper. And if you had like a bunch of space between your lines, they called it white space. If you're using a screen that's dark, obviously it's not white space, it's a darker space. But who the heck cares? But make sure you've got your points. Your sentences are typically less than 11 words. They're not strung on together with complicated language. There's no jargon. There's no acronyms in your writing. Acronyms being like, EBS, Elastic Block Storage. Just spell it out, Elastic Block Storage. Don't assume anybody's going to know. And Alan, if I can say anything, just don't use acronyms ever because you don't even know what they mean. When I started my tech career, I was working with Frame Relay. And we had all these permanent virtual circuits. They kept calling them PVCs. And there was a massive outage. And this is when I was an engineer before I was an architect. And I get a call and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, Mike, we need you to come into the office. We're having trouble with the PVCs. And I immediately said, look, it's not going to wait for me to come in. Administer the patient a lidocaine bolus and I'll come in and see them. They're like, what's a lidocaine bolus? And then I said, but you just told me the patient has all these premature ventricular contractions. And I told you to start a lidocaine bolus. They're like, no, Mike, the network's down. The PVCs are down. I'm like, oh, well, PVCs could mean a lot of things. I have a student, Delray, really good guy, really smart, good architect. One day, about a year ago, he's like, how much money should I ask? And this is before he was an architect. We trained him, got him his first engineering job, and then he stayed in our training, got an architect. And he said, Mike, I'm doing VMs. I said, does that mean you're working on voicemail systems? Does that mean you're working with virtual machines? Does that mean you're doing vulnerability management? What does it mean? He's like, oh, it's vulnerability management. And that's the key, Alan. So learn to not use acronyms. Learn to not use sentences that are typically more than 11 words. Learn to create lots of space. Learn to get real good with bullet points. Learn to write for readability. Now, Alonzo, you're a marketing executive.
Yeah.
You spent 30 years in marketing and you've got a $150,000 MBA. And when you need to write for executives, did you do what they teach you in your MBA program or did they teach you how to write for marketing people?
Absolutely not. Definitely from marketing perspective. As the kids today and others say less. Less is more. Okay. You want to do as much, add as much detail as get to the point as quickly as possible. Okay. You don't need all the superfluous words. You don't need to sound like Shakespeare in the park in your reading and writing. People don't want to hear that. They want to know, they want to get and drill down to the situation, the problem, the solution, the team members, all the associated nuts and bolts in a concise document because they want to execute quick. They don't want to go through all the reading, too long, didn't read. They don't want to deal with it. And also because of the lack of in marketing, normally the normal citizen, you have less than 2 seconds to keep their attention. Okay, which is hence the point of purchase, the POPs, if we call them, at the cash register. You want a quick purchase. You want to give them, this is what we have, this is what we can do, and this is how much it costs. Boom, right on the counter. Next thing you know, the cash register is swiping your product. Because we understand, as marketers, you understand the science and you understand the mentality of what consumers do. Consumers, CEOs, CTOs, whoever your audience is, they are the consumer, no matter what it is. They're buying services. They're buying services. And as a cloud architect, you're going to design them, you're going to present them, and ultimately sell them. using varying strategies. Now, writing, I went through, like you said, expensive education, all to find out that in the real world, it's totally useless. So think about what you're going to write, who you're writing it for, why you're writing it, what is the delivery method, because in any project, they're going to decide on which is going to be the best way to communicate for this overall project. Make it easy for them to understand, easy for them to see, easy for them to grasp the concept, and more importantly, easy to execute. So breaking all that down, find out your overall writing style, be able to shorten it, concise it, just like anything potent. You want less of it, but you want more of an impact. And once you're able to do that, you're going to be able to make an excellent cloud architect with wonderful business skills.
Great guidance there, Alonzo. Alan, if I'm ever in Kansas City, I really want to meet you.
Yeah, I do. Same. Back to Alan, during interviews, how significant is the presentation of your response compared to its accuracy?
Okay, Alan, so there's two components that go into a response. The accuracy, which has to be there, and the quality of the presentation. If it's accurate but poorly presented, I cannot hire that person as an architect. I may be able to hire that person as a back-end engineer, but an architect is always a customer-facing role, regardless of where we're at. So I can't hire anyone who doesn't have quality presentation skills or quality communication skills. And even if you work for an end customer, let's say you work for the bank, you still have a client, and that's the executives of the bank that you work for. If you work for Microsoft, your client is the bank. If you work for the bank, your client is the C-suite of that bank. So no matter what, you still have the bank. You still have a customer. So your presentation skills is absolutely essential. But if you give me bad information, that's pretty terrifying. So here's where it comes into play. And Alan, I've interviewed about 6,000 people. I know that sounds crazy over the last 25 years, but I've been doing a lot of them. Here's where interviews die. When I ask someone to tell me about themselves, and they can't concisely tell me in 30 seconds who they are, interview's over. Done, right then and there. If the person doesn't know who they are, how can we hire them? And that gives you a really good information about the person. Do they know themselves, their communication skills? And why does that matter, Alan? So let's say we look at it from the perspective of the art of war. Business is war. You know, we want to sound all soft and squishy, but it's war. One company gets the deal, the other company loses the deal. Sometimes one company loses a deal and goes bankrupt. When it comes to an interview, it's war. It's either you or the other 50 people that are interviewing for the job. It's war. And in war, if you want to be victorious, know yourself and know your enemy. As stated in the art of war, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you'll always be victorious. So going back to that, tell me about yourself. If I ask the person to tell me about myself and they can't answer them, I'm thinking, whoa, okay, they don't know themselves. Means 50% of the time they're going to lose. Can't hire them. Now, the next thing is if I ask a person a question, a competency question, and let's say I asked them about BGP and they told me, what is BGP? How does BGP work? Why I should use it? Like, okay, this person knows something. This is great. And if I ask them, what is BGP? And they babble and they start telling me configuration commands, I know they don't know anything about BGP other than how to configure it, which is not how it works. So can't hire that person. Here's the next place these interviews fail. I asked someone a question that I know the answer to, or I wouldn't ask the question. And I asked them a question about something, and they bluff. They lie to me. Now, think about it. I can't hire somebody that I can trust. It'd be like marrying somebody that's cheating on you. Can't do that either. So same thing when someone lies, the interview's over. Where else do people fail in the interview? When I ask them a question, it's like, yeah, great, all right, fine. And they look like they need a nap. I can't hire someone that doesn't have energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the job. Now, Alan, I know you. You're pretty awesome in all of these things. You're pretty special, and I know you. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And, you know, that's really it. And if someone's confused of who they are or what their goals are, I still can't hire them. But the quality of your presentation, the quality that you do, but the accuracy of the presentation is good too. For example, imagine being on an airplane and the pilot was very polite, but they didn't know how to fly the plane. You would not be very happy. And I promise you would not hire that pilot. Same thing with a doctor. You know, I know surgeons that honestly, a robot has a better personality, but they're so good at what they do, someone survives. So they go see another doctor that actually convinces them they need the surgery, and then they do the surgery themselves without really get the surgeon. But it's there. So the ability to be able to communicate, the ability to communicate accurately, the ability to know yourself, the ability to present yourself, that is absolutely, absolutely, absolutely critical. I hope that answers your question. So if you've got some questions, ask them. If not, Alonzo's got a lot of things to do. I'm in the process of creating some content, so there's there. So if you've got your questions, ask them now. Otherwise, Alonzo and I are going to go back to our normal duties. So on Thursday this week, we've got a How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. It's completely free. And we also have our new Artificial Intelligence Architect program. So ask your questions so we can work with you.
And also definitely a shout out to Lopez. I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm glad you're back in the fold at Go Cloud Careers. We're looking forward to having you back. We always have students, whether it be medical, good things, challenges in life, that need to take a break. And we always afford our students to do so, because that's the whole basis of the program. Is not boot camp oriented. It's not about that. It's about you learning the concepts, learning the competency on your own time. So we're glad you're feeling better, Lopez. We're ready to get you back up and running. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us, and we're ready to get you started. So, Mike, we've got one from Folashaki, and he's saying, why does the cloud architect role feel so free compared to engineering?
Folashaki, you are right. The cloud architect role feels very free, and the engineering does not. I like to think of we cloud architects as cats that are kind of running around doing our own little thing, beating to our own drum. But let's kind of talk about why. So you can't really define the architect's job. And here's why you can't. Our goal is business optimization, right? So a healthcare organization and a bank are going to run differently. We're going to have two banks, and they're also going to run differently. They'll have different business processes, different specialties, different internal systems. So that really changes so many things. So the architect needs a lot of freedom in their job. The freedom to go take your client to lunch and spend $100 grand on them that year. And believe me, I've done it to a single client if it was worth it, with the company credit card, thankfully. So there's that. The architect, a sales cycle could be one day for a mini business. It could be a year for a global business. So if you pin the architect down to something, they're not going to be successful. Now the architect's going to have to build a team. What does that team need to look like, Folashaki? Well, it's going to be different for a global bank than it will be for a hospital, than it will be for a regional bank, than it will actually be for a retail store. So now I need a lot of flexibility in the teams and the people that I need. Now, the better I have, the more my knowledge is in business, and the better I understand an industry, the better of a solution I'll be able to provide the organization. So going back to this, again, the architect needs to be free. So the architect is really, really kind of like that doctor. They've got to build the solution. They design the solution, present it, sell it, and all that stuff is kind of soft and squishy. Now, it needs to be by very nature. Now, let's look at an engineering role. That's a doer role, And when you do stuff, you've got to be able to do it in the same way, day in, day out. So, for example, if you get a hamburger at a McDonald's, the reason that the hamburger at every McDonald's across the entire United States and potentially the world tastes the same is they get the beef from the same place. It's cooked in the identical ovens in all these places. It has the same process. It's in there at the same temperature for the certain number of minutes. So when you do stuff to increase accuracy, you need structure. So like creatives and artwork and marketing, they can have structure. They're sitting there listening to Bob Marley singing No Woman, No Cry, drinking a glass of scotch, and all of a sudden they've got their new idea. By comparison, engineers need to be regimented in the work that they do, and there's that. Plus, the reality is because the architect's an executive position, they're given much more freedom, they're given much more respect, they earn a much higher salary, and pretty much nobody tells an executive what to do. Executives are kind of like a free lion. They're the the king or the queen of the jungle based upon what kind of lion it is. They roam free. They eat what they want. They sleep when they want. And the engineers are kind of like smaller animals, still great animals, but not the lion. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So that's why it's so free.
Well, it looks like Mike. All right, from side. What is your strategy for decision making and problem solving within the workplace, Mike?
Well, it all depends on the situation. So let's say I have an emergency. Like there's a fire in the building. I'm going to resort to, say, a command and control leadership style. Alonzo, you go there and take care of these people. Chris, you go do this. And that's appropriate. Now, it may be so there's that. So we have to look at whether we need an affiliative leadership style, a command and control, and that's going to be situation dependent. Now, decision making. Here do I generally do decision making? I try to obtain the best information I can. And I try as an architect to build a team of advisors. And with every decision, I quantify both the tangible value and the intangible value. So let's say I'm trying to deal with a security architecture. I have to calculate that organization's risk. Have to. So I'll have to do a business case where I'll calculate the annualized loss expectation for every single thing. What would happen if this breach were to occur? What will happen if this breach would occur? And the likelihood of it. So, Sai, if you're familiar with the expected value of an opportunity in an MBA that they would teach in an MBA program, very similar to this. So we're going to have to quantify either every risk or every potential thing and what we have. Then, after we quantify the risks from a quantitative perspective, we also have to look at the qualitative things. For example, let's just go back to security, for example. If an organization's hacked, here's their financial exposure. But what's the brand damage that occurs? What is the loss of trust that occurs to that business? And what's that worth to a business? So what I try to do is I try to gain as many facts and figures and quantitative things as I can. And then I look at what's called the opportunity cost. If I invest in this versus this, which has a greater expected value, a greater return on my investment capital after the financial metrics are there. And by doing that, we make educated guesses. So whether you're on Wall Street, whether you're a physician, it's all about managing risk. It's about collecting the best information you can. So what I try to do personally is I try to hire a team of people that are smarter than me. I try to hire a team of people that have different skills that I have. And I always try to hire a team with very diverse skill sets. And I tell you what I mean by very diverse skill sets and very diverse educations. I love having some medical professional on my team that's now, say, working in security. And I love having a graphic artist on my team that used to be in the creative world and, kind of on that perspective. And I love somebody that went to an Ivy League school. And I like somebody that went to a community college and got to deal with people that actually are working in the job. I like to deal with somebody from Aruba who went to a different educational system. And I like to hire somebody in Cape Town, South Africa. And I want somebody from Cameroon and I want somebody from Vietnam. And why do I want all this stuff? Because each of these people had different life experiences, different education, and they think differently. So when it comes to solving the problem, now I got a bunch of problem solvers. By comparison, if I hired everybody from Harvard, everybody would have learned the same things, had the same thinking, had the whatever. And again, it's like having one person in the room. It kind of reminds me of Xerox. Xerox probably they made the biggest mistakes of any tech company I've ever seen. They invented Ethernet, the networking thing that we use, gave it away. They also invented the graphical user interface and gave it to Apple because all those people in the boardroom thought it was nothing. So that's kind of typically the way I do it.
And one of the things what Mike is saying is when it comes to decision making and problem solving, the overall question is this: is the juice worth the squeeze? Yeah. If you really, are you going to get all the effort you put into it? If you're going to smash against this mountain, are you going to find the gold you're looking for? Or is it just going to be nothing but more rocks? So think about the overall scenario and analysis of what the data says and if it's going to be worth moving on or consider other options.
Yeah.
Back to Simon, Mike. When do architects use whiteboarding tools such as Lucidchart for presentations?
Well, Simon, I don't use Lucidchart or any of those tools for presentations. I use an actual whiteboard. I go to the client site, I use a whiteboard, and I use a marker. feels good, smells good, and everybody's used to it. That's what I use. Now, if I have to do it remotely, I'll generally use something like PowerPoint and draw little boxes and arrows and squares. I generally don't use graphics programs. Now, Simon, at the lower levels of architecture, people will use a Lucidchart or a Draw.io to draw their graphics. The better of an architect you are, the farther you go in your career, here's what you tend to do. You tend to do something in PowerPoint or a napkin, take a photo of it and send it to a graphic artist. It's going to make it look beautiful in design. But for whiteboard tools, I use an actual whiteboard. For presentations, I use PowerPoint. Now, here's the key. I don't do death by PowerPoint. I don't read PowerPoint slides. That'll get anybody out of the room. Not one bit. What I typically do is I write a couple words down on a slide. Like, it's enough for me to look at it, cue it in my mind, and speak extemporaneously. And at the same time, it gives some people something to look at that they can bring in a handout that they can take their own notes on. And I want people taking paper-based notes with a pen or a pencil. Because what happens when we type in the computer, we forget it. But when we write by hand, it activates a part of the brain called the reticular activating system and helps commit things to memory. So I typically use that. But that's how I do it. I do a lot more whiteboards with an actual whiteboard than I actually would with a online. And the rest of the time I use PowerPoint because everybody's familiar with it. It's on every computer. Little box of squares, draw lines are pretty good.
Back to Folashaki, Mike. In documentation, is it worth using business formulas to just demonstrate how the architecture positively impacts the business?
It's mandatory. It's mandatory. So if you're going to write a documentation of the document, you're going to have the way the system works, how the system works, how flows go into the system, how people go into the systems. You're also going to include a business case, and the business case is the expected value that the business would receive, and it's going to use the assumptions, the inputs, the outputs of what you've done. Without it, it's not an architecture. And that's the problem with all these like silly certifications that are called architect certifications that don't teach architecture, they teach systems administration. If you can't quantify to the business how it's going to help them, they're not going to adopt it. They're just not. I like to say, and I've done a lot of billion-dollar architectures, nobody ever woke up in the morning and said, how do I spend $1 billion? They just don't. That company's like, okay, what do we need to spend to get this achieved? What do we need to spend to increase sales? What do we need to spend to remove, to automate so we can get rid of this percentage of workers that we don't want to have? What do we spend if we insource it ourselves versus how we outsource it ourselves? Where's my pain points in the organization? What can we do to make better forecasting, things for that, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Those are the kind of things. So yes, mandatory, mandatory.
Is it a fatal mistake, Mike, for a software engineer turned cloud architect to write code on the job, even if it's just once?
Folashaki, if I had an architect that stopped focusing on the organization's business and started writing code, I would politely go to that person and say, do you want to be an engineer? Do you want to be an architect? If they say, I want to be an architect, they say, you will never write code again. We will have people that will write the code. I need you to focus on the business. Or I might just go up to the person and say, you know what, I really like you, but you're not going to make it as an architect. Let me introduce you to somebody on the engineering team and I'll try to get you hired as an engineer. I can't have anybody doing engineering as an architect. You can only focus on one thing. You can't focus on business processes. You can't focus on delivering business value. You can't focus on leading a team. You can't focus on strategy. You can't focus on anything if you're touching the tech. So if I have an architect that demands to touch the tech, I don't want them on my architecture team. They're a liability, not an asset. Plus, a good architect, I'm going to pay $200 an hour to. And I'm going to hire a software engineer in India to write code for $15 an hour, not $200 an hour. So they're wasting my time and they're costing me money. So no, I've had architects that tried to do engineering work for me. I found new homes for them where they were very happy back in engineering. There's just no reason for it. What are you going to focus on? Are you going to focus on optimizing your client's business, or are you going to focus on writing code? And if you want to write code, Folashaki, that's fine. It's great. Go write your code. If you want to be an architect, I want you dealing with your client. I remember, Falashaki, I had a client that actually, when I had a job, actually 2 jobs, and they brought me in the office and they said, Mike, your expense reports are pretty small. I said, what do you mean? They said, where are you investing in your client? I don't see any dinners. I don't see any cocktails. I don't see any football games. I don't see any of it. What are you doing? In fact, Falashaki, 25 years ago, I almost got fired from my first architect job because I was a network architect and I logged into a router and I fixed a BGP issue. Poof. They're like, do this again, Mike, you're fired. I was very grateful for that lesson, and I never made that mistake ever again.
What I guess, you know what, just like cloud architects, Mike, I want the first thing that we ask, why would you want to do that? What is your motivation for risking a career in cloud architecture just to do some code? If you have a itch you want to scratch, then do something minor as a hobby off of your job, you know, to see if that is the direction you want to go. But you're risking your career, you're risking your reputation, you're risking your salary, you're risking a lot of things just to peek through the keyhole to see if you can do something. What happened? Could you share that example of what happened with that young person who used I believe a Cisco problem onto the live environment?
Oh, yeah. So, you know, Falashaka, early in my career, right after I finished the CCIE exam and certification, which was a miserable certification, the only one that I'll actually say is really hard and brutal. It took me a year. I had to read 75,000 pages of reading. I was on a network in Wall Street, and there was an outage. And the troubleshooting team looked at this, and they were like, Mike, could you just look at this? And I looked at it. I'm like, whoa, that was on my CCI exam. The CCI exam put it there because it was designed not to work. And they wanted you to know it was not going to work so you'd know how to fix it. And there's that. So, and then that person, well, we re-educated that person so he never used a production network again. Now, Falashaki, I'd ask you this question. Let's say you run an airline. You have your airplane pilot who's responsible for getting that plane from point A to point B. If that airplane pilot, when they were up there, pushed the, what do you call it? The autopilot and decided to leave the cockpit and start handing out drinks to the people on the plane and telling jokes to the people, and he's the only person or she's the only person flying the plane, would you keep them as an airplane pilot? Or would you say, I got a new job for you as a flight attendant? That airplane pilot would be fired in a second for doing flight attendant work. You can't do somebody else's job.
And just, you know, we're not trying to put the fear into you, but we need you to always ask the why. Whether it's, you know, as a cloud architect, you have to, this is opportunity cost. This is like, what do you stand to lose by making that decision? Okay, this is about looking at the analysis. This is looking like the problem solving. Like I mentioned before in the thread, is the juice worth the squeeze? If it's not, don't do it. Back to Cy, Mike. Can you describe a complex cloud architecture project that you've worked on? What were the key challenges and how did you overcome them?
So see, Cy, cloud architecture is no different than anything else. So what are the key challenges? Let's say one of the, I'm trying to think of one that I did. I could tell you I work with a bank, and the biggest problem that the bank actually had was the feeling when customers would call their financial advisor, and the financial advisor didn't remember their name. And if Alonzo was the financial advisor and I'd call Alonzo and say, it's Mike, Alonzo seemed a little funny. And then you could hear Alonzo typing feverishly in the back end, trying to bring up Salesforce so that he could potentially remember. So one of these was like a pseudo contact center that I had worked on, where the organization itself was trying to create a new next generation financial advisor system of the future. And what we did is we replaced the PBX with unified communications and hosted the systems on a private cloud. And what we had done is we integrated the Salesforce CRM into the phone. So if I called Alonzo, they would look at the calling line identification. It would pop a screen that said, this is Mike Gibbs. And it would talk about my assets. It would talk about my real estate holdings. It would talk about my stock holdings, my bond holdings. It would talk about my risk tolerances, the things that I like. And then as soon as Alonzo could ring the phone and I'd say, it's Mike, oh, Mr. Gibbs, how are you? by the way, that stock that you have in Apple has been doing great. I knew that was a good idea. We talked about that a couple months from now. How can I help you today? Now, that made Alonzo, the financial advisor, look good. We also created that screen pop on the financial advisor's client associate, which is the assistant that could also process trades. Now, at the same time, we took that computer telephony integration and we created where if we transferred the call, let's say I called Alonzo and I talked to him and I said, Alonzo, you'd like a new mortgage because I want to buy a second home in Greece or a third home in Greece. Alonzo could transfer the call to a mortgage broker in Greece that could then set me up with that mortgage, all with all the information that I have. So I kind of hope that kind of makes sense to you along the way. At the same time, those organizations actually did a lot of phone calls out to try and recruit people to sell stock to. And in the US, where we had the most of the work, where there was a do not call list, where the banks would get fined for breaching the do not call list. So we had to integrate that unified communications. We also, in the process, had to fortify that private network with quality of service. Because if we didn't, if a worm would go on the virus, it could take down the IP phones, which could take down the entire network, which was part of the strategy. Now, the organization, so, that was one of the more complicated architectures I worked for a big bank. But to be fair, I've consulted on basically most of the world's largest internet service providers, most of the world's largest banks, and also most of the world's largest healthcare institutions. So the key challenges are always aligning the people, the processes, and technology. That's the challenge. Because so many organizations out there have a disconnect between the business and the technology teams. And the technology teams just shove stuff in there. And the stuff they shove in there actually gets in the way of the business. But this was a particular one where we had to go to the executives. We had to go work with the traders. We had to go work with the trading managers. We had to work with the financial advisors. We had to work with the mortgage teams. And when you're dealing with a global bank, that's a whole heck of a lot of stakeholder management. That was a fairly complicated one I worked on.
Folashaki, by what year do you foresee mass layoffs of engineers due to ChatGPT?
Folashaki, it's already happening.
Already
happening. IBM laid off engineers, and they made it very clear. We're laying off engineers because of AI. We're not laying off customer-facing positions. And they hired more customer-facing positions while laid off. It's already happening. But it's not ChatGPT. ChatGPT is just one form of AI. There's a lot of AI, and there's a lot of AI that can do a much better job at coding things, especially privately trained models. There's a lot of labor challenges going on, and AI integration with robotics can do things. You're looking at Tesla, who pretty much is getting rid of half of their employees. Now it's another 10%, but they're doing automated manufacturing. There's car companies in China that use machines and robots to build almost entire cars. It's already going on. But when do I think it's really going to be bad? 3 to 5 years from now. It'll be the best thing in the world that ever happened to engineers. I'm sorry, to architects, because new AI means new solutions we can design, present, and sell. But generally speaking, engineers that do hands-on work, it's not good for them. It's the key that the architects there are talking to people, selling things, managing stakeholders, leading teams that makes the architect immune from these.
Folashaki, again, is it accurate to assume that the architect role is one of the more specialized careers on the planet?
I wouldn't say that. Folashaki, I would tell you that every executive role is an architect role. Everyone. What's the CEO of a business do? They design the strategy for the business. That's an architecture. It's called the business architecture. What does the chief operating officer do? They really focus on running the business, thinking about business processes and controls. It's an architect role. What does the C-suite do? The chief information officer. Help design solutions to help that business be more efficient with IT. Same thing in enterprise architect role. Same thing a cloud architect role does. What does a lawyer do? A lawyer deals with a person or a business, and they look at that organization's challenges. They examine all the available evidence, and they create a strategy. What does a physician do? A physician assesses an organization, a person's healthcare conditions, and they create a strategy to get them better. Every big job that pays $150 to $2 million a year is an architect position. Every one of them. It's just, in this particular case, the architect is dealing it with technology to optimize that business. But it's the same job as the lawyer. It's the same job as the physician. It's the same job as the strategy consultant, and there's millions of strategy consultants between Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini. They're called business architects. Some are tech architects, but no. I would say it's a very specialized role in that it's a top 5% role, meaning architects earn the top 5% salaries of the world, and they typically have the top 5% best careers and the top 5% upward mobility. But I wouldn't call it specialized. I mean, I've got people like Daniel Boyso who dropped out of high school that got an architect job after we trained him. I've got people like Ivan Tambo, who was working as a waiter before we trained him and got him hired at Amazon. So, you know, I got Pierre Dassault, who was working on sailboats before we trained him and got him hired as an architect. It's a special job that requires a very special set of skills. But the reality is any job really requires a special set of skills. And what makes anybody successful is how good they are at their job, which sadly is the exact opposite of what I see in tech careers. You know, if somebody wants to be an Olympian, they master their sport. They live it, they eat it, they breathe it. You know, you're not going to find Usain Bolt doing marathon running. You're not going to find him swimming in the pool either. He's either going to run his sprints or he's going to be in that weight room building power and strength. That's what they do. Now, if Usain Bolt decided he was going to be a part gymnast and a part triathlete and a part golfer, he'd be bad as the sprinter and mediocre at everything else. That's like the person in IT that gets certified in 10 different people's jobs. They've effectively destroyed their own career. So any of these careers are specialized. The key is how good you want to be.
Diggleman, does a CISSP make you look too technical for higher level roles?
Oh, Dingleman, and it's good to see you. I hope you're enjoying that job at Microsoft. It was an honor to work with you. So the question is not really. Now, if you asked me about the CCIE, then I'd say, yeah, it does. And Dingleman, I'll tell you, when I was a CCIE and I had my first executive architect role, my manager asked me to remove the CCIE and CISSP. Had it just been the CISSP, probably wouldn't have been a problem. So when I did my CISSP certification, it was at a boot camp. And Cisco paid for the people to come in. They certified lots of us. There were lots of executives in the class. There were lots of sales engineers in the class. And the CISSP itself, it's about quantifying risk and managing risk and creation of a strategy and creation of a policy. So you'll see lawyers that go become a CISSP. You'll see business executives. You're fine with the CISSP. Now, if you told me that you were looking for a Palo Alto firewall certification, I'd say no. If you told me you were looking for, you know, an AWS Advanced Security, I'd say no. But a CISSP, that's a good security certification. I'm actually working, it's a very good certification. I remember when I did mine, and I may have some good news about that for you soon, Dingleman. But no, that's definitely a good one.
Subash, when it comes to a position or rather to position a solution to a customer, should it be a cost play or value play?
Well, it's going to be dependent upon the customer, but cost is meaningless. Here's what I mean by meaningless. If you charge me $50 for something, but it does nothing for me, it's a waste of $50. If you charge me $1 million for something, but it gives me $5 million of value, I'll go buy it all day long and never even think about it. So it always has to be a value play. Always. Remember, we're not engineers. Engineers are like, I saved a buck here, because that's the engineer's job. Architects like, here. And let's say you're dealing with a company that's got $20 billion in sales, Sebastian. That's not a lot. It really isn't compared to a global enterprise. If I can create a technology system that can, literally speaking, increase their revenue by 1% or increase their sales by 1%, that's worth $200 million each year. So if it cost me $150 million to implement that system, it's going to pay back for the next 10 years. That's $2 billion. Plus, you know, the extra $50 million this year, I'll buy it any day of the week. And that's the key. Executives think about opportunity cost. The people that have the money, they're going to pay for this. It's like, if I do this, what's the net return on me versus what this? So anytime somebody tries to come in with cost, I generally laugh. Especially when people try to tell me I'm going to save money on the cloud. That's the biggest joke in the world. And one of the biggest lies I've ever seen. For 90% of organizations, the cloud is going to cost 2.5 to 3 times more minimum than they would in their data center, after accounting for all the management, electricity, real estate space, etc. It's like, for any enterprise anyway. So it's generally be value. Now, if I've got a customer that only wants to know cost, and that's all they care about, well, they probably don't need my services and not going to be happy with my services in the first place, but I'll give them cost. Here, we could shave a couple of pennies off here. But honestly, an architect is more of a financial professional than an accountant. And here's the difference. You go to a finance professional to invest your money and earn something on it. You go to an accountant to count the beans at the end of the year that says, oh, you spent too much money over here and too much money over here. Maybe you could save a couple of bucks. In the end, your net income would have gone up a little bit. So we're more finance people than accounting people. On the engineering side, we can be much more accounting. On the architecture side, we've got to be much more value. What are we bringing to business, and kind of keep that?
What should be the 3 key strengths of a cloud architect should be to be successful in his career?
Well, one of them is going to be technical. You need to have good, strong knowledge of the network, the data center, and the cloud. Without it, you're not going to be there. The next couple, the first one I'm going to say is business acumen, meaning business knowledge. Because if you don't understand business, understand it well, like an MBA. Now, I'm not saying you need an MBA, but you need master's in business administration level knowledge, at least about business. If you don't understand business, when you integrate technology, you're probably going to damage the business and hurt them, which is why most technology projects and most cloud architectures are complete disasters. You know, CIO magazine said 54% of cloud architectures are abject disaster failures. McKinsey says 75% of technology projects are complete disasters. So kind of think about that in the back of your mind. Business acumen. The next one is probably communication skills, because nobody's going to buy your solution if you can't communicate it well to them. Nobody's going to want to work for you, and you're going to need a team to be a great architect if you can't communicate. And if you can't get the requirements right because of lack of communication skills, the ability to figure out the business problem and figure out how the business operates and understand the kind of technology, understand how the technology is working, what's working well, what's not working well. You can't do that, your architectures are going to be disasters. So it goes back to the old programming thing, garbage in, garbage out. And if you don't have good communication skills, everything is going to fall apart. So I'd say that's there. But I'm going to add another one. I'm going to give you 4. I'm going to tell you leadership skills.
Yeah, must.
Architecture is not designed by one person ever. It's going to be a team if it's a real architecture. Now, sure, if we go to my village in Greece and there's an American supermarket in my home village, then the whole village has 5,000 people in it. I think it's actually gotten real big. Now we've got 10,000 people in our village. You know, that could be a single design, because what is that American supermarket that serves 10,000 people going to do along with 15 other corner stores? You know, they don't need an architecture team, and their architecture design might be $1,000 a month max. Or better yet, we'll give them 2 servers and smack a hypervisor on it, and they'll be done for years. But, you know, there is that. So, but, you know, in a real architecture where they're going to hire real architects, you're going to have all those skills, and you're going to need a team.
Volashaki, what are your thoughts on investing in the stock market and engaging in delayed gratification?
I'm going to separate these two. Engaging in delayed gratification is the secret to being successful.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't delay gratification and you can't save your financial resources, and the best investment, Volashaki, is you. Invest in your education. That's the first thing. Then you need to invest in being healthy, right? If you're unhealthy, you can't do anything. And if you're not educated and don't have the right skills, you won't be able to do anything, and you'll be succumbing to a lifelong low income. So let's say there's those 2 things. But then where do you invest? It all depends upon the risk and what's going on in the macro and microeconomic environments. Should it be stock market? Could it be a real asset like real estate? A lot of that's going to depend upon your risk tolerance. And it's going to depend, you know, if you can look at a stock and you understand that stock and you understand that business and you understand that there's going to be growth in that industry and you know why that business is well positioned and that business Maybe it has a dividend, or maybe it doesn't because it's got a high growth rate. Maybe the price to earnings ratio is low enough that you see value in the stock. Look, investing is critical, but you have to understand what you're doing and when you're investing. Most people just take shots in the dark when they invest. And most people lose. So sophisticated investing is really great. And if you're not sophisticated, find a sophisticated professional to help you do it. That I will say. But, there's times when stocks make sense. There's times when bonds make sense. There's times when real estate makes sense. There's generally times where you diversify your portfolio, and all these kinds of things make sense. But it's macroeconomic, big global market right now. It's also microeconomic. The market in South Florida right now is very different than the market in New York. People are running out of New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. as fast as they can, and they're coming to Florida. Florida can't grow fast enough. I can barely go to a store around here. It's 2 hours to try to take my wife to dinner because people are coming in. So maybe the Florida macroeconomic real estate market might be different than Georgia or New Jersey or New York. At the same time, New York typically has an international draw, so maybe there's still people coming in. What's going on in that business? Is it a business-friendly city, which is going to drive people in? Is it a business-unfriendly city with high taxes and high regulation that's going to cause businesses to leave? You got to be able to analyze all this stuff and then make a prediction. And at the end of the day, it's just a guess. All Wall Street did is manage risk. They just have people that are real good at managing risk. And they also have algorithms and AI, and they've had AI for decades that can sort of analyze the risk and help with people make better decisions. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But delayed gratification, I'll say, is a must. Investing in the stock market, that you need to understand all of your issues, all of your risk tolerances, when you need the money, how you need the money, can you afford to lose the money, and then manage that risk accordingly. Any thoughts there, Alonzo? You got a good business background too.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Number one is that the more you reward yourself quickly, the less time the less time you have to focus on what really matters, and the longer it takes for your journey. So if you are driving and this is just a quick scenario, if you're on your way to say, for instance, you're having some sort of great festival, but every time you are driving there and you stop and you gratify yourself with simple pleasures, next thing you know, that opportunity for that time frame will be diminished more and more to the point that you won't get where you need to go because it's all going to be over. So with that being said, focus on what really matters. Focus on your education, your competency, your ability to communicate, your leadership. How do you strategize and provide solutions to problems that companies are looking to you for? Get rid of, and this is some real talk here, get rid of that membership for Netflix. Get rid of, or just put it on pause like you could. Focus on what matters. Those are distractions. Going out and having fun and drinks with your friends, distractions. Looking at that game when you could possibly be taking time to study, distraction. You want to go out, or you want to eat this, or you want to do that. If it's counter to your goal, which is the greater value? That quick little hit of gratification, or looking down the road to really see what really matters, what's going to be more important, what's going to have more staying power, and things that can not only change your life, but change the trajectory of your children, or maybe even their children's children, based off of what you do today. So think about delaying the gratification and focus on what really matters. Thoughts on investing in the stock market. We can't tell you what to invest, how to invest, or where to invest, but go to a very experienced person who knows that realm, and focus on how you can equate your growth over a short and long span of time. If you don't have the resources to risk big, I would focus on things that give you incremental income, or rather incremental stock value over time. Roll it, keep rolling it, and build something that's going to last a long time. Is financial literacy a must for architects? Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. If our job is to optimize a business's performance, and by performance we mean financial performance, and we don't understand finance, it's like a doctor that doesn't understand medicine.
Right.
And it's a great, I'm glad you asked that. And that's why like these certifications don't get anybody hired, because they don't teach business optimization. They don't teach business. They don't teach sales. They don't teach leadership. They don't teach executive presence. They don't teach how to design. They just teach how to build. So yeah, financial literacy is absolutely, absolutely, absolutely critical. But it's more than just financial literacy. It's being able to understand the business, how the business operates, which means understanding business operations. It's an understanding of business processes. It's understanding how people fit into the system. And anytime we need to make a change, it's going to affect all the employees. When we make a process change in an organization with 100,000 employees, it could be that 100,000 employees need to do something differently. How do we manage that change? What do we need to do to get those people on board? How do we convince those people that's the right way? Most people don't like change. Now we need a set of change consultants coming in there if we're not the change consultant. And there's people that build whole careers on just helping organizations manage change. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. If you've got some questions, we can take a few more. Ask them now. Otherwise, Alonzo and I have got a lot of cool stuff to do today.
Yes, we do. Mr. Dominic, haven't seen you in a while. How does a typical decision-making process for an architectural decision look like, Mike?
Well, it's going to be different for every organization, but typically speaking, if you don't get the executives to say yes, it's all over. So let's talk about how it should be. If you've avoided the executives the entire time, and then you say to the executives, here's your solution. It's great, right? Most likely it's going to be a disaster. Now, if you've engaged the executives from day one, and it doesn't have to be the C-suite, it could be VP level, it could be senior director level. You know, a senior director in Cisco could earn more than a senior vice president at a small company. So when we define executives, we have to kind of talk about what we mean by that. But if you start with an executive and the executive has sponsored that and they're looking to make a change, and you're there early enough, you can influence that organization's desire to do that. So when they issue, say, a request for proposal, if you've influenced the request for proposal to be things that your organization can do well, you're going to be better there. So the next thing that occurs is, assuming you've engaged the executive and assuming the entire time you've evaluated the business processes, and by evaluating the business processes, you spoke to the operations people, department heads, and the employees, and then you've examined the technology, and you've engaged all those networking people, the security people, the cloud people, the operations people, the people that maintain the systems, all the people that are part of the team. You're going to get their buy-in and their sponsorship. And hopefully along the way, you've had lots of meetings and lots of dinners and lots of drinks and sporting events and team building events with your customer, and you've got the relationship. Assuming that way, and now you've actually designed the team, there's going to be a series of discussions. You've got an architecture in mind. You're going to talk about it with the client, and they're going to say, I like this and I like this, but I don't like this for X, Y, Z reasons. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So we'll have lots of dialogue back and forth with key stakeholders and the organization. Then we're going to build a proposal. That proposal is going to have a business case. And the business case is going to calculate the expected value of the opportunity. And what we've seen with similar clients, for example, that have done similar architectures and the business benefit. From there, it's going to be a process of sales. We're going to get involved in the negotiations. And there's going to be some financial negotiations with their legal team, their procurement team, their executives, and us. There's also going to be some negotiations on the resources that are needed or lack they're needed. And then ultimately, the proposal will go to the executive. And the executive will then rely on their team of leaders to say it's good or bad. The CEO is not going to make a decision on the vacuum. They're to say, yes, I'm going to pay for this. They're going to look for the chief operating officer to see how it's going to fit in operations. They're going to look for the chief financial officer to check the organization's financial resources. They're going to be dealing with the chief information officer who's in charge of the strategy. They're going to be dealing with the enterprise architects, the chief technology officer, the chief information security architecture. And that's going to be a sales process that's going to go back and forth for a period of time. But lots of fun. Lots of opportunities to do anything other than touch the technology, meet people, get to know people, talk to people. I kind of think it's the most fun thing in the world. I love sales.
Mr. Dominic, thanks. Here's a follow-up question for you, Mike. How do you write down such RFCs or decision records? Any special tooling for that?
So, Mr. Dominic, I don't think you mean RFCs, which is a request for comment, which is an Internet Engineering Task Force specification for a technology protocol. I'm assuming based upon what we talked about, you're saying RFP. If you are interested in RFCs, let me know and we can talk about that. I've read lots of RFCs and I've worked on teams that have helped create new Internet Engineering Task Force specifications. But you don't write down the RFP. The company will issue you an RFP. They may issue an RFI, which is a request for information, which is information only. They may issue an RFQ, which is a request for quote or request for pricing, or they may issue an RFP. Now, in a perfect world, you've already been speaking to that client 3, 6, 9 months ahead of the RFP. You know that client, you know their business, you've got relationships. And you're kind of showing them, this would be one of those cool things that you could do. And ideally, that's covering something that your organization can truly help the customer with. I mean, truly help that customer with. Not just say you're going to help them, but I mean meaningfully help them. And then what are you going to do? Well, the RFP, I've worked on RFPs that are 400 pages of questions, and I'm not joking. They come in with 400 pages. So here's the special tooling. You and a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and or maybe you hire a project manager to help you. And now you build a team of all the people that can help you. And then you delegate. You the software people, do these 10 questions. You data scientists, do these 10 questions. You AI architect, you do these 10 questions. You network engineers, you do these things. You network architects, you do this. You IM architects, do this. And then what do you got to do? You got to make sure they give you the stuff. Then you get the content from them, and then you smooth it out. Because, Alonzo may write differently than me. Actually, Alonzo and I could be twin brothers. We write pretty much the same. But, Alonzo and I might write differently than Chow in our organization. I'm sure we do, actually. And Chow might write different than Eddie. Eddie was very educated, and he writes in these highly verbose ways. Professional language, but more verbose. Alonzo and I write to the point executive communication. So you got to make sure that all the writing sounds good. So if it's a big RFP, what are you going to bring with you? A tech writer. And you're going to send all the responses to the tech writer. They're going to be basically an editor, and they're going to edit it down the way they would a book. So it's going to have a unified voice and a unified feel. But no, there's no special tools. The tool is you and organization. One of the best tools for these kind of things is Microsoft Excel. You could also use Microsoft Project, which is a good project management tool. There are other commercial project management tools out there like Asana for these big giant projects that could be done. But all in all, most of those big project management tools that I've used were so much overhead that I used the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and I made it nice and simple. Although Google Documents could work, they've got a version of, they've got a spreadsheet. Whatever you're using, just make sure that it works and you're going to use it consistently and methodologically. Great question.
Mohammed, in each cloud service provider assumption, that's what he's talking about, has price calculation for resources added. Are there any other tools to manage cost?
Well, you're talking about estimate cost. Managing cost is something different. So let's just assume you mean estimate costs. The cloud provider is going to have their tools, but you got to remember there's all these in and out fees and some fees which have actually gone away. There's all these transfer fees from regions and areas to each other. So you're going to use a little bit of those cloud provider tools, and then you're going to have to use your expertise or your organization's expertise. And you may find that things are 30 to 40% more than the calculators that the cloud provider gives you on average, due to all this other stuff that's hard to calculate for. So it's going to be what you call a swag, a scientific wild ass guess. And what by that is you'll use the cloud providers tool, and they'll add what we used to call a fudge factor, which is something that you can use an educated guess to say, okay, well, this cloud provider still gives us this, but there's all this other stuff that's never calculated, which is going to be this. Add that in, and then you're going to have 3. You're going to create what you think is the worst case scenario. They're going to create what should be created as the best case scenario, and then you're going to create what you think it is, and then you're going to give your client real information so they can see the range of what it could be based upon your experience or your organization's experience and expertise. And that's why this information is very important to keep. And then after it's deployed, there's FinOps practices, and that's not my world, but they can be used to kind of look at the operations and try and look for opportunities. Oh, wait, we put this thing on serverless because somebody thought it was cool, but it runs all day long, which means it's now 10 times more expensive than if it was on a server. Right there. Or we over-provisioned those servers when we took them from the data center and a lift and shift to the cloud. They're not being used. Let's shrink the number of servers there first, or let's reserve this stuff to try and get a discount. Or let's call the cloud provider and say, your service stinks and I'm leaving the cloud unless you give me a good deal. And maybe they negotiate a better deal with you. Or maybe you use multi-cloud and you negotiate cloud providers against each other. So there's lots of tools to manage costs, but that's more related to your business acumen as opposed to an engineering tool. That's a really strong question, Mohammed.
It is good. Alan again, Mike. What are your thoughts on the labor market in regards to hiring? I understand that the very best are still getting hired, but do you see a time similar to when you first started the program?
So, I don't know what happened last week because Chris was doing last minute preparations before he went on vacation, and we're very happy Chris is taking a vacation. But I can tell you in the 2 weeks prior to that, we had 9 people hired. So who gets hired versus who doesn't get hired? The people that are great get hired. Now, great does not mean experience. It means competent. And what does that really come? And one of the people that was part of that list never worked in tech and got a very senior security architect job in a major governmental organization, and via NDAs, we can't talk about which one. But you probably know the person. Actually, I'm sure you know the person, Alan. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. I will say that organizations still have some people to cut. There's still plenty of dead weight in these organizations that they can get rid of. And what's causing it? So a recent study on LinkedIn said that 58% of employees in the US are quiet quitting, which means doing the bare minimum not to get fired. Another study in LinkedIn showed that over 50% of workers in the US are disengaged from their work, and 18% are actually working against the company's best interest. So if you think about it, all those people that are doing the bare minimum, a company could get rid of them and be better off, and then hire 10%. So there's that. But at the same time, organizations still have work to do. And, where are they going to steal? Somebody else that's unmotivated in their last job and hire them with you to this company to still be unmotivated? So we've got to look at the greater macroeconomic environment. What we're seeing is the bottom 30% getting laid off. We've only seen about the bottom 5% get laid off, but I still think we have more layoffs that can occur. At the same time, we're seeing great people getting hired. Now, Alan, I'll tell you that in my experience in my career, every job I got was during a layoff. Every one of them. Every time somebody laid off and got the people that didn't do a good job, they hired me. And I remember when I joined Cisco, they were in the middle of a hiring freeze. It was like a 3-year hiring freeze after the dot-com bust. And when I would walk down the hallways, the first person said, "Who the F are you?" And that was a regional sales manager. It was New York. What do you expect? And then everywhere I went, I'm like, who are you? I'm like, I'm Mike Gibbs. I work here. They're like, you work here? I haven't seen a new hire in 3 years. And then right after I got hired, a whole bunch of strategic hires got hired, and then that was the end of it. I'm seeing IBM advertise new jobs and at the same time lay off people. We just saw Amazon do a layoff, and at the same time they're posting all these brand new jobs. So what you're really seeing is some of these back-end engineering positions going away, which we told people would happen 2 years ago. We made a video series on how to get out of non-customer facing roles. And these customer facing roles are there. I'd say, Alan, you're about 75% of where you need to be. And I know you. You are super smart. You are incredibly motivated. You've got a phenomenal heart. And quite frankly, I'd hire you because I know how good you are. But I still think you need a little bit more of that executiveness, and I still think you need a little more knowledge. But you're pretty close. So I think there's opportunities. I think there's massive opportunities in the AI architect space, massive. And I think organizations will be hiring AI architects like crazy. I also think all this cloud repatriation, meaning come on for the public cloud and build these hybrid clouds and hybrid multi-clouds, which we told people were going to happen years ago, is coming to fruition. And that's creating many more opportunities for cloud architects. To get off of this silly, I took you the data center to the cloud and now it's 5 times more expensive, but it doesn't work as well. So all those ridiculously designed cloud architectures, from people that designed it 10 years ago, that didn't know anything about architecture, that somehow got certified and somehow snuck into architecture roles, that stuff is being redesigned. So lots of opportunities for cloud architects, for AI architects. And I also see a lot more networking opportunities too for network engineers and architects. And normally I don't say engineers, I say architects. But here's the thing. Now that we're dealing with all this cloud repatriation and all these private clouds, like I told people were going to happen, now you need the people to build the clouds. And who builds the clouds? The networking people. We create all that infrastructure to make it all work. And all the people that went to the cloud because they thought it was going to be simple, they used the single cloud, that was a disaster for them. And now 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. Who makes multi-cloud work? Networking people, network architects and engineers. So I see a lot of opportunity there, Alan. And I see a tremendous amount of opportunity in the security space. There's a lot more cyber threats. There's wars going on all over the globe. There's state actors that hack into things, as well as hackers that are hacking into things. So all this is incredible opportunity now. Opportunities for the sales executives too. There really are. But I do expect engineering layoffs at the same time as all these architecture hires. It's not going to be the great ones that get laid off. We need those great engineers to build it, but it's the ordinary average person. The bottom 30%. The people who make a lot of errors, the people that aren't very motivated, the people that go on a conference call and shut their cameras off and don't say a word so you don't know that they're there. The people that don't have good communication skills or good soft skills that the manager doesn't like. Now, you're, Alan, one of the most likable people I've ever met. You're incredible. Young, smart, and motivated, and I see a lot of good opportunities your way. I don't want to know whether you're time 3 months from now or 6 months from now or 9 months from now, but I know it's coming on. All you need to do is stay focused and keep at it. Next time I'm in Kansas, we got to get together. I usually go to McPherson, Kansas, and yes, that's in Kansas, and I know you're in Kansas City, which I think is in Missouri, that you're not in the Kansas City, Kansas, but it's pretty close. And the next time I end up in Wichita, which is a couple hours away, or McPherson, Kansas, to go visit some friends, I'd love to see you. Okay, so
we have one question, Mike, I believe. Okay. I just want to double check. Actually, we don't. Actually, that's the last question we have. So we're good to go.
Okay, so I'd like to invite you to Thursday's How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. It's on Thursday. It's completely free. We'll talk about the cloud architect role. We'll talk about what we do as architects. We'll talk about how to skip HR so you don't auto reply and get auto rejected when you apply for these jobs. We'll teach you everything that you need to know, what employers dream about in an architect. It's completely free and it'll be on Zoom. So guess what? We can talk for about a half an hour and then you can ask us questions. You want us to evaluate your skills and mini interview you? We can do it. You want to ask about your career and your personal situation? We can do it, and it's all free. We also have a completely free document in the description of this video. One on how to get your first cloud architect job. One on how to, how to get your first AI architect job. And it's completely free. And for the next 2 weeks, approximately 2 more weeks more, you can get our AI architect program at 50% off. This is a collaboration between David Lithicum. He used to be Deloitte's head of cloud strategy, and he was doing AI for everything. He's been an architect for 30 years with over 30 years of AI experience. And me and our organization for what we do, teaching people how to interview, how to do their resume, how to build their brand, the business acumen, the leadership, the sales skills, the soft skills, and everything else, and getting people hired. So take advantage of that. It's half off, and it won't be half off for long. And I say this because the second we run that sale that's over, we're going to get 100 emails that day and say, I want the sale, and we can't do that. So, because it's not fair for us to charge different prices to different people. So take advantage of it while it's now. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday on the How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.